Hi there, and welcome to Lesson 3 of my Kotlin JavaScript tutorial. Today we're going to continue working with the DOM. Let's go back to IntelliJ. If you recall our project, we left off with two files, an index.html and a main.kt. KT contains our Kotlin code. If you look at index.html, we're bringing in the Kotlin standard library, which is kotlin.js, and we're bringing in Kotlin.js demo.js, which is our custom code compiled into JavaScript. And if you look at main.kt, essentially what we're doing here is building an HTML tree as a string. The reason I say tree because in a real-life app, this gets more complex, and HTML is, by definition, a big tree. So for example, it might look something like that. And this will become a bigger and deeper tree as time goes on, and your app becomes more complex. Also, we made use of templating using Kotlin's string interpolation feature, so we can stick variables inside of this string. So the string essentially becomes kind of a simple template. Finally, we attach that string of HTML to the document by saying root inner HTML and assigning it to the string we just built. We attached an event handler by using this code down here. First, we actually got a handle to B1. So B1, you'll notice, is a string, and it corresponds to the string over here in our HTML. So the more strings you have to represent program items, the less chance Kotlin has to help you find your errors. So we'll address this as we progress through our exercises. So we get a handle on B1, and then here we attach an event listener to B1, a click event, and then here we have a Kotlin Lambda function that gets executed on click. So now let's do something similar. We're actually going to do the exact same thing, but not using string building. Instead, we're going to use the tree building API that is built into the browser, and that's called DOM. You might already know how to do this, so in case this might just be a review, but this is kind of a stepping stone into our next segment, which will be a little bit more interesting. So let's delete our string building stuff and just start again with root. So let's say document.createElement div. So we'll create a div programmatically using the DOM API, and then we'll create an h1 and we'll create a button. Let's assign those to variables. So I'll call this variable div. I'll call this variable h1. I'll call this variable b1. All right, so this time we did not have to attach to the b1 string in order to get a variable pointing to this button. Okay, now let's attach the h1 and the b1 as children of div. So say div.append child h1 and div.append child b1. So now we're building a tree here. Finally, let's attach div as a child of root. So we'll say root.append child, div. And it's warning us that root might be null, so we use our bang bang to say that we're aware of that. And there you have it. We've built up a tree of HTML using the DOM API instead of string building. So root is our tree. Root has one child, which is our div, and the div has two children, which is the h1 and the b1. Now, right now, the h1 and the b1 don't really have anything going on, so let's address that. So we'll say h1.textContent equals hello2, and we'll say b1.textContent equals click me to. And finally, we'll reattach our event handler. This code is exactly the same. Add event listener click. And we'll say print clicked to. So what have we really gained here? Not too much. Our code is arguably more verbose. And what we did gain is a tiny little thing. We now have B1, we're not accessing it as a string like we did before, where we said get element by ID. So that's one less string that could get screwed up. So the less of those strings we have in our program code, the more Kotlin can help us. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to say Command F9. And I'm going to go back to my HTML file and right-click and say Open in Browser. I'll say Command Alt-I to show my console. And I'll click my button. And it still works. So I just showed you two ways to do the exact same thing. The first way was to create a dynamic HTML application by programmatically building an HTML tree via string building. The second way was to do the same thing using the DOM API, which is a tree building API built into your browser. So regardless of what you're doing, when you're building web apps, you're essentially programmatically building a tree of HTML nodes. So that's two ways to do the same thing. In the next exercise, I'm going to, believe it or not, show you a third way to do the same thing, but this is going to be a lot cooler using some special Kotlin stuff. And it's going to make your code more type safe and also more IDE friendly. So until next time.